Welcome to everyone. I'm Lorne Sossin, Dean of Osgoode Hall Law School, and this is the 2013 running of the Dean's Summer Webcast. Welcome to Osgoode. We'll have information we hope will be useful. We hope the people you hear from will have answers to the questions that you no doubt have as you look ahead to the fall. We're incredibly excited to be welcoming you to Osgoode, and you'll have a sense from those you hear from me, I hope, as well, as to the pride we bring to this great academic community, great professional community. And we know that it's a community that's built one student at a time. So we know, even though there's a class of wonderful people who will be moving together through a lot of that experience, that each of you have your own background, your own hopes and aspirations, and your own thoughts and questions. So we think this is a great way to begin that conversation, and we'll look forward, of course, to welcoming you here in person in September. And I hope you have a relaxing and productive and fun summer between now and then. So the lineup for today, for the next a couple of hours, will be as follows. We're going to talk about your first week at Osgoode. We're going to cover all the different orientation issues, getting started, getting registered, getting materials. We're going to cover a bit of an overview of the first year program. That's going to include everything from managing the workload to the courses and options and different aspects of the year that are worth focusing on. We're going to have a chance to discuss paying for law school and some of the financial logistics, including financial aid and budgeting and resources that we have here through our student services. We're then going to have a discussion of clinical and experiential opportunities at Osgoode, and this again is one of the areas where we take the most pride and have some amazing choices to keep in mind very much from the week you arrive and throughout our academic program. We're also going to have a chance to finish off with a discussion of student life, everything from the Osgoode Chambers, our residents, to the array of clubs and student government, ways to get involved, ways to find your own communities within the larger Osgoode community. So it's an exciting lineup, and to guide us through that process, we have some amazing members of our community here who will be leading the charge. And let me just do some brief introductions. To my left, on the far end, we have Nadia Narcisi, who is from our student services staff, has been at Osgoode about 10 years. And will be guiding the discussion in particular on how to pay for law school, and has both great experience with the students who've successfully navigated that process at Osgoode, and even a case or two of the cautionary tale to watch out for. Next to her is a faculty member, Professor Trevor Farrow, who is also the director of our clinical education at Osgoode. He has been leading our ethical lawyering in a global community course, one of the pillars of the first year program. Has been at Osgoode after a brief stint out west for, it feels like 10 years. It's got to have been close to that. And again is involved in a number of research centers, great projects, initiatives, and this other aspect of all of the ways to enrich the Osgoode experience through getting involved in research activities, I hope comes up tonight as well. Next to Trevor is Associate Dean Kate Sutherland, who is got particular responsibility over the first year program, but has been a leader at Osgoode in a number of capacities for a number of years. And in fact, I think we may have been hired around the same time some years ago, but not that many. And Kate as well leads another side of the Osgoode community around law and literature as part of a broader law, arts, culture initiative, and is a writer herself, and hopefully those who have a similar bent will seek out the kindred faculty members, and each of my colleagues, you'll find, has not just an array of scholarly interests, but other aspects that they take the lead on at Osgoode. So welcome Kate, and she will in particular talk about the first year program and orientation. So over to our fabulous students who are joining us for the sessions tonight. Julian de Bartolomeo, which I only practiced twice beforehand to make sure I would get that right. Julian has finished his first year at Osgoode, is going into his second year, and was a criminology student beforehand at York. And we should add, you're not just coming to our wonderful law school, but of course also to a young, large, vibrant university up at York. So tips on how to make the most of that part of the experience will be welcome as well. And Julian has now the student recruitment coordinator in our Office of Admissions and Student Services, also has served as a student ambassador, and will be participating in a new initiative this year with our Dean's Tutor program that will pair first-year students with upper-year students in order to provide a personalized academic success mentorship, and we think this program, again, is going to take off. Next to Julian, we have Kinda Shaheen, who is also going into her second year from a slightly different background, from neuroscience and psychology. And she also is coming after starting another career in management consulting, as many of our students do. Not everyone in that same career, but this is a second step for a large number of students. And Kinda joined a number of initiatives in her first year, including becoming editor-in-chief of our yearbook called The Citation, and also that gives you a camera and license to take pictures of everything that goes on at the school, which is quite fun. I just got my copy of the yearbook. It's pretty wonderful, so thanks for that role in particular. She's also a member of the Osgoode Women's Network, the Osgoode Baking Club, known as TORTS, and she can tell you what the acronym means when the chance comes. And another program of which we're particularly proud, Law in Action Within Schools. The acronym for that is LAWS, which brings Osgoode students as well as U of T students into our neighboring high schools to do a series of mentorship, outreach, and programming for those high school students, and you'll hear more about that from Kinda. And she will also be joining Orientation Week as a group leader. She's got a summer job with LAWS and will continue in the LAWS family going forward as well. And finally, Eva Chan, who is moving into third year, is a bit of an experiential junkie. And by that I mean she's participated in some of our best experiential programs, including CLASP, which is our student legal aid clinic, and also at CLASP, I should say, she's worked as a division leader representing clients before tribunals. She's now being invited to return as a senior division leader, which will allow her to train incoming students. She's a member of the mooting team that will compete in the family law moot. Also will be volunteering with the Family Law Project, which is a Pro Bono Students Canada initiative, and I think has been a part of LAWS as well. So all of that, again, for Eva, also coming as a second career, having been a professional technical writer before coming to Osgoode. Welcome to the three of you. Thanks for giving your time. And I should add, the goal tonight is not just to share and provide information and insight, but again, to respond to your questions. So as you form questions, please do send them in, and you'll see how to do that magically, I am sure, on your screen. And we are looking forward to responding as best we can to what you most want to hear. And to get us started in that journey, I'm going to turn it over to Associate Dean Kate Sutherland. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to welcome you tonight, and it will be an even greater pleasure to welcome you to Osgoode in person on the first day, on Thursday, August 29th. We have a lot of activities planned for you for Orientation Week, for that first day, the first weekend, the first week. It will likely seem a bit of a blur, but the idea really is to introduce you during the course of that week to a lot of different facets of Osgoode life and to the Osgoode community, so you get a sense of what's available for you here, what you're in store for, and hopefully get comfortable here very quickly. So that first day, August 29th, we'll begin with a welcome assembly at which you will meet the dean, various members of the administrative staff, student leaders, the chief librarian, a member of the IT staff, our success and wellness counselor. Again, there will be a bit of a blur of names, but hopefully what that will do for you is get a sense of all of the resources that are available to you at Osgoode to help you succeed in your time here. It'll help you put names to faces, and then you'll know if and when you need to access those resources who you can go to. We will have also that first day a lunch at which the dean will introduce you to all of your first year professors. And then in the afternoon, there will be a guest lecturer who will, one of our leading, an Osgoode alum who's a leading constitutional lawyer, human rights lawyer, disability rights activist, who will be able to start getting you excited about the beginning of your academic journey, of what studying law can lead to, of the exciting and meaningful work that it can lead you to. Speaking of your professors and the academic study, you will begin your classes on Tuesday, September 3rd, and the first classes that you will be exposed to will be your legal process class and also ethical lawyering in a global community, and you will shortly hear a little bit more about that from Professor Farrow. And then the week after that is when the rest of your first term classes will begin. In and between all of those classes will also be lots of opportunities to get to know about other things about Osgoode, volunteer opportunities, places where you can begin to start a little bit of legal work even at this early stage in your study of law, student clubs, and so on. And you'll hear more about all of that from Kenda momentarily. And of course, there will also be a social whirl. The Student Orientation Committee is busy planning all kinds of activities for you. And there you will get the opportunity to meet each other and to meet lots of upper year students and to start forming those relationships which will become so important to you over time. So I think that's a bit of an overview, and maybe I can turn it over to Professor Farrow to tell you a little bit about that first week of classes.
Sure, thanks, Kate. As Kate just mentioned, one of the things that's going to happen right off the bat is that you are going to get into 2 of your first year courses. So this starts right away, and those are legal process and ethical lawyering in a global community. Legal process is a course that will last all year. And it looks at the process of law, including legal research, legal writing, ways of resolving disputes, and ways of thinking about how law works and how the process of law works. Another course that you'll be introduced to in the first week is a course called Ethical Lawyering in a Global Community. And that is a 2-part course, the first part of which runs in the first week of law school. So right after the Labor Day weekend, we will meet for 4 days that week. And we will look really at the question of who we are as lawyers, and more interestingly, who you are as a lawyer. How you're coming to law school, what interest you have, why did you come here, what you might think through in terms of what it's like to be a lawyer at law school, and then taking that into the profession. Why are we doing this? How do we interact with our clients? How do we interact with society, particularly one that's a very plural and global society? So in the first week of law school, we look at some of the foundational principles of what it is to be a lawyer. What is a professional? What is justice? What is access to justice? And how do we serve that public interest that we all will think of in different ways? We will then pause that course, and you will move on to your other fall term courses. And then we will meet again in January, where we'll be able to revisit some of those questions, how they came up in those first term courses, and then deepen some of those professionalism conversations going into your second year. So I think one of the things we'd like you to get excited about is the idea that first week is not just about orienting, it's about having fun, it's about getting excited about law school, and it's also really about diving into the question of who are you as a law student and lawyer, and starting to think about those questions right off the bat. And I think if there's a message I'd like to leave us with now, it's that I think there's lots of perceptions out there that there may be only one way to be a lawyer, or one person you have to be or way to think like a lawyer. And our hope at Osgoode is that there's lots of ways to think like a lawyer. There's lots of stories to be told as lawyers, and we'd like to tap into those and excite those stories right off the bat.
Hi everyone. Congratulations on making it to Osgoode. Many of us will say that the hardest part is over once you make it to Osgoode. So like the others have mentioned, O Week is a great time to meet others, especially upper years, that will become a very helpful resource for you in your first year because they've been in your shoes before. And upper years, like Julian and myself and Eva, are always willing to help and answer any questions you might have. There is a ton of information that comes out in your first semester, especially in your first few weeks at Osgoode. And while it can be really easy to panic about all of the information that you do get, we encourage you to take a moment to embrace it and appreciate everything that the O Week committee has done to provide a very informative and fun week, but also take a moment to record the resources available to you that will be able to help you answer those questions later on. Primarily have fun, meet people. O Week is not supposed to intimidate you. It's supposed to prepare you for the semester ahead and your gradual introduction to the academic side of things with ethical lawyering and legal process will be a great way for you to develop your skills slowly as you adjust to law school. On the other side of O Week is the rest of your semester and the rest of your law school career. And a great way to maintain your engagement and stay connected to the Osgoode community is by participating in a number of clubs and societies at Osgoode. And so there are about 80 clubs and societies at Osgoode available to you. And because all students come from a variety of different backgrounds, we encourage you to shape your experience at Osgoode by picking the clubs and societies that suit your interests and the areas of law that you might wish to pursue in the future. So there are cultural clubs, there are also clubs that are in the area of law, so public interest or corporate law. And additionally, there are many volunteer opportunities that Eva will discuss in a few minutes. So getting involved in Osgoode outside of the classroom keeps you interested and engaged. And it doesn't necessarily mean because you're a 1L that you're going to be just a participant. You can take on leadership roles. And this will give you an opportunity to test your leadership skills, but it will also encourage you to maintain a well-rounded life and a well-balanced life as a student and as a person outside of Osgoode. And as a side note, it's a great way to balance your resume. So get involved and be excited and don't be overwhelmed. We promise that you'll survive your first semester and your first year, even if first week seems very intimidating.
All right. Well, I guess that takes us on to a more general discussion of the first year program and what's in store for you and how to prepare yourself for it, perhaps a little bit before you get here and also, of course, once you arrive. You will register during that first week, and you'll have that's when you'll get your schedule. You'll find out what section you're in, when your classes are going to be, and what your books are going to be, and a chance to buy them. I'm just going to anticipate a question in advance because this is one which comes up all the time, and that is, what should I read before I come? Can I start in advance and find out what my books are going to be and read ahead a little bit? You can't, because we're not going to tell you what your books are until you get here. But we also just don't recommend that you do that. You don't really want to be doing your assigned reading until it is assigned for you by the professors and until the professors are able to sort of guide you through it and explain to you what it is they want you to get out of it. So we don't think it's actually an advantage to you to do that. And also, you want to come fresh and energetic and enthusiastic rather than feeling already exhausted from having studied up in advance.
All that said, there are some wonderful novels out, and we can get to maybe a top 10 list before we're done.
Oh, there's a challenge for me that I'll be thinking about while everybody else is speaking. But we can actually recommend for you some other kinds of reading that you can do to prepare. And actually, just this week I've sent out a welcome letter to you and also a copy of a book that will help you orient yourself to law school and what to expect by Osgoode professor Alan Hutchinson. It's called The Law School Book. How to Succeed in Law School, I think. And don't buy it because we've got it for you. It's on its way to you. And that kind of advanced reading and some other things that I suggest in the letter just to kind of get you thinking broadly about Canadian law, but also fiction about law, biographies of judges and so on. Those are the kinds of things that you might want to read for context if you want to do any reading in advance. But in terms of diving in, you want to really wait until you get here and get some guidance from your professors. So what about that? How can you sort of best make the transition and start your work as a law student when you begin? As you've heard, you're going to be beginning with legal process and ethical lawyering on the week of September 3rd. The rest of the classes for first term will start the following week. Ethical lawyering and legal process both go year-round, but 3 of the classes that you'll start the following week will just be first term classes: torts, contracts, and criminal law. You'll also begin State and Citizen, which is a year-long course. And then once the winter term comes, you'll pick up property and also a perspective option class where you'll have an opportunity to choose a class in which you'll write a paper from a broad array of topics, something we hope to meet everybody's interests. So what should you do to prepare once you get here for those classes? The leading piece of advice that I would give you is just listen to your professors. Pay attention to what they tell you to read, how they want you to prepare, what they're expecting from you when it comes time to turn in assignments and to write exams. They want to give you good guidance about that. If you don't understand what they want from you, ask them. They're a resource. They're here for you. We have an excellent faculty at Osgoode, lots of award-winning teachers in the first year, and I think you'll find lots of assistance there. In terms of broader things like how to prepare before class, taking notes, synthesizing the material, studying for exams, writing law school exams. There's lots of places to get guidance on all of those things as well. Most of your first year classes will have a Dean's Fellow attached to them. Dean's Fellows are upper year students who are there to serve as peer mentors for you. They're students who will have, in most cases, taken those classes from the same professor as you're taking them from, so they can give you a really good idea of what to expect and how most effectively to prepare for them. In addition, my office, the Office of the Associate Dean First Year, runs an academic success program, so lots more assistance there in terms of all of those things about note-taking, preparing for exams available there. And I'm available to you as well, to anybody who wants assistance as they're moving through the year with any sort of academic difficulties. I can meet with one-on-one. So really that's the key thing that I would say is there are all of these resources available to you. You're entitled to them. Take advantage of them.
Kate, just following up on one of the things that you mentioned, which I fully subscribe to, is the not looking to do a lot of reading ahead of time in the summer. I think that's really important for people to take that load off. One thing we have done in the past that we may do again for that first week ethical lawyering course is we may get that syllabus out to people ahead of time, and that we've done in the past couple of years, which is not a reading heavy course at all, but at the request and suggestion of previous years of students, in fact, have said, why don't you try and get us at least the topics ahead of time so we can be aware of what's going on and do some of that work. Not the work, but just be ready for it ahead of time. I quite frankly think that you should be spending your summer doing other things, and so I'm not going to encourage you to be reading ahead of time. We do build time in during the week for you to do those readings, but for those of you that want it or need extra time, that will likely be available. So hope to have that out.
Julie, you want to talk about how you managed workload and other secrets of success?
Secrets of success. Well, hey everyone, welcome to our family, our community. When I speak to incoming students, I like to give them 4 main messages, and they're really quick. The first one is that there's no cookie cutter way to success, as you tried to allude to. There's no secret. And you got here for a reason. There's a reason that you were successful in your application, and I encourage you to keep your study habits from either your undergraduate or your graduate degree. There are some constants, and they're fairly obvious constants that Professor Sutherland touched upon, like going to class. That's a very simple thing. It's a very simple thing
I just
you
took
could
that
do
for granted that they would do
to
that.
be successful. Keeping up with readings and finding a classmate you can depend on was really important in my first year success. Embrace the up and downs of the first year of your law school career, because it's a really unique transition into law school, and there's going to be a very steep learning curve, and take it as it comes, and you'll have more difficult months. You'll find that during exams, let's say, it might get a little busier, but then you also have opportunities to take a step back and really enjoy your first year. I also like to stress that it's very important to have a social life. A lot of people, it's easy to get bogged down with your first year readings. There's a lot of them. However, I would recommend scheduling free time with both law school friends and non-law school friends, because at the end of the day, sometimes you need a break from this academically heavy first year. Finally, like Professor Sutherland said, make good use of the resources here at Osgoode, both our official resources and our non-official resources. We have a great Office of Admissions and Student Services, which is a centralized office where you could find anything from career services to financial services. It's in one centralized place, and that's a great resources. But like Kenda mentioned, your upper year students, your friends, and your family, those are resources, and I really encourage you to take full use of those. And that's it.
All right, well, we've been, again, giving you some of the overview information that we think everyone will have an interest in, but we'd love to turn to some questions now that you'd like us to focus on, and we'll have these question breaks throughout the evening. And let's go to the first question now, which is coming from Richmond Hill. And this is Sabrina's question. Is the academic work of the JD program different from that of an undergraduate program? If so, how are they different? And what are some ways to help us in the transition? So let me start off with a quick answer, and then I know others may jump in. And it's an excellent question, and I think if it's not on your mind, it should be, because this style of learning will be different, and that's what most people want, is to come to law school, exactly because it's a different learning experience. In undergraduate experience, I find a lot of the academic work is in the area of put your best argument forward, gather together the material. This is thinking more social sciences and humanities, and again, we've got science backgrounds and others with us. But on this distinction, I think is really important, and what makes law school so distinct is at law school, the issue around persuasion, around advocating a position, often means coming to terms with the weakest elements of an argument, with all the different contexts and perspectives. What would the other side of that case say? What would other people affected by a law or a particular decision, how would they view it? Walk in their shoes for a period of time as you're thinking about an issue, and be able to articulate the same issue from multiple perspectives, giving as much respect and fervor to the opposing view as to the one that you're ultimately persuaded by, and explaining why you're ultimately persuaded by the one that you're advancing. These are the building blocks, I think, of a legal way of thinking about problems. And a problem-solving way of thinking about material is very much what we are hoping to advance at law school. It's not just absorbing the information and then being able to write about it on an exam. It's understanding the laws and justice system, the context of them, and then being able to solve someone's problems based on what you've learned, that I would say is very distinct from most undergraduate experiences. But can I actually talk with people a lot from science backgrounds who say, I didn't write papers day and night in my undergrad. I came from a world in which x equaled something to a world in which I'm supposed to look at every algebraic equation from its perspective. How do you do that?
Right.
Was that a hard transition for you?
Well, it's an adjustment initially because in science and math, there's a right answer and there's a wrong answer. And as Dean Sossin said, law school is about establishing a persuasive argument and using the arguments that you have to develop, I guess, almost like a story in your exams. So it is an adjustment at first, but I think if you had analytical skills applied in your undergrad, you can definitely lift those and apply them to law school in the same way that a poli-sci student would. But I'd say the 100% exams in first year can be an adjustment, especially because they aren't multiple choice and they are writing. But again, like Julian said, it's a learning curve, and you get through it.
And I'd add the science students often bring a really healthy approach to their writing style. It's not full of a lot of just random unnecessary words. It's like, what do you need to say and how do you say it most clearly? We've got another question, but any other thoughts on Sabrina's question about differences to undergrad?
What the differences are, I think, depends, as indicated, I think, by Kenda's response, what your undergrad is, obviously. You all come from very different backgrounds, and some of the things that you bring in with you will be very useful, and some of the things will be new. So some of you will already be accustomed to problem solving if perhaps you came from a business background. Some of you will be already used to writing a lot if you came from the humanities. But depending on what it is, you have to figure out which of your skills are going to really be helpful to you and which are the new things that you have to learn. The main thing that I would say, though, would be just not to underestimate how different that it is when you start. Even if you've studied law before, if you studied it as broader, sort of law as an institution, if you haven't read cases before, if you haven't been grappling with statutes before, it's a different kind of reading. So you might initially get a reading assignment and think, oh, well, 10 pages, it won't take me very long. But at the beginning, it might take a long time. It's almost like learning a new language. So be patient with yourself, but also allow yourself the time really to adjust to that new thing.
And on the upside, in most undergraduate experiences, though not all, you're dealing with teaching assistants and layers of that, experience till you're actually connected to a faculty member. And again, from the very first day of law school, you will be with and getting to know faculty members directly. So I think the quality of that learning experience, because of that direct contact with faculty from day one as colleagues, not just as people to receive and absorb information, is a really fun, empowering, engaging, and a kind of experience once you've had that I think lends itself to why people do that extra reading, do want to keep up in ways that in the beginning, there is a learning curve, but it's motivating, I think, to be in that experience. Okay, we've got a question focused on O Week. It's from Dean in Hamilton, and it goes to the issue of the O Week schedule. The question is, as I understand, that we won't find out our schedule until orientation week. When do we actually receive the schedule? And again, this we only skimmed over as a forward planning, but do you want to say something more direct about the O Week schedule?
I actually don't know the answer to that question. I think it gets mailed to you. Is that?
Yeah. So you will get it as an electronic package, and this will also, come with information like about exactly where to be, when to be there, and there's something both comforting and bizarre about this first experience. As you have gone through undergrad, you're focused on a professional future of one kind or another, but this will be your one day, more or less moving in sequence together through each stage. But we try to organize all of those parts of orientation week so that you really can focus on getting to know each other, getting to see the law school, and trying to keep all of the necessary kind of administrative hurdles as human and efficient as possible. But again, you'll have all the communication and opportunities to ask about anything that's not clear along the way. Okay, so let's do a couple of last questions, and then we'll move on to how to pay for all this. So Nadia, get ready. One further question is asking about classes on the Jewish high holidays, and each year we do factor in a number of days in the fall in which there are going to be different kinds of accommodations. Some, of course, are statutory holidays and the school is shut down. Thanksgiving is a good example. Others, we know many students will not be attending, and depending on the timing of those days, when they fall, in other words, with an erev before or during the day, there can be a range of accommodations based on the kind of observance that students have. But the short answer is, if you are observing the Jewish high holidays, you will not have to miss important work in your classes, and through a mix of those accommodations and also doing our best to have audio recordings where students are going to miss a class for religious observance, we make sure that students, no matter what the holiday is, no matter what the community practice is, that we take all of those into account. But of course, the Jewish high holidays affect a large number of students in addition to staff and faculty, so these are always ones that we plan ahead for. And then I think with that, unless there's any other interventions in response to the question, Nadia, let's turn it over to you, and a question I know that's on the mind of all the students who are tuning in, and again, it's something that we take very much to heart at Osgoode in terms of providing information and support.
Okay. So I'm Nadia Narcisi, the Student Financial Services Assistant, and I work with Penny Spence, who is the Director of Student Financial Services here at Osgoode. Our top priority is to make sure that your financial concerns are covered, and that's why we have an open door policy in our office. We are here to help you get through law school with as little debt as possible, but you need to come to us for help if you need it. Never be embarrassed of your financial situation. Annually, more than 60% of law students apply for bursaries. Many students are in the same situation as you, and you are not alone. Penny and I are here for you if you need us. You're welcome to contact us anytime by telephone, email, or in person. Our numbers are available on the website. This past year alone, we allocated well over $3.5 million to our students. In that amount, there's entrance and upper year scholarships and awards, bursaries, medals and prizes, internships, emergency funding, external funding, and more. Tuition alone for next year is approximately $21,592, and that's subject to board approval. To make it through law school financially, you must budget properly. You have to plan ahead and take full advantage of all the sources of funding that are available to you. Deadlines and reminders are posted on our website, and we send out emails regularly as well. Provincial Government Student Loans, or OSAP, as it is called in Ontario, is a basic and essential source of funding, and it is a requirement for the Osgoode bursary program. OSAP and government funding is a loan, so you have to remember that. The advantage is that OSAP is interest-free while you are a student, and that some portion of it becomes a grant and does not have to be paid back when you graduate. Currently, the maximum is about $14,000 for a single student in Ontario. The application has been available online for a while, and it's best that you apply as soon as possible if you haven't done so already. If you're from out of province, you should also apply early to your provincial student loan program. Because we expect that you take responsibility for funding law school, we also require a student line of credit if you wish to be eligible for and to apply for a bursary. Over a decade ago, Osgoode established and continues to negotiate a student line of credit program with one particular branch of RBC. The advantages of using them are that you do not need a cosigner. The interest and repayment is now at prime plus 0.5%. You're considered a student in your articling year, which gives you a 4th year of not paying back on principal. And there's also a further 5th year considered as a 1-year grace period until you must commence your payments on the principal of your loan. We highly recommend that you deal with Cindy Wong at the RBC branch at the Highway 407 location. That's actually where we initiated this special program. She understands our students and our programs and continually provides excellent service. You are not obligated to use RBC. You can go to any financial institution of your choosing. Even if you're turned down for a student line of credit or government funding, you will still be eligible to apply for, and you will be considered for a bursary. So that's an important note. And as per bursary funding, there's only one process. There's only one bursary process at Osgoode, and the application will become available to students on the first day of classes. The bursary deadline this year is September 23rd, and it is a firm one. It is actually cast in stone. There are no exceptions made to that date. Bursaries are dispersed later in November directly into your student account at York, so it goes directly towards tuition if it hasn't been paid yet, or you could request a refund if it has been paid. There's 3 sample budgets available on our website. They were recently updated. These will make you aware of what we consider to be reasonable expenditures for the 8-month study period. They're a very important reference, particularly for your financial planning and for your bursary application. You can also find a very important tool on our website. It's the Money Penny Financial Tracker. This will help you keep track of every penny you spend. It's a very useful tool and can help you keep your spending in check, but it's up to you to use it. It's a great tool if you're willing to use it. External funding is out there as well. This is free money. We encourage you to make the effort to find it. About 5 years ago, we created an external funding opportunities website right through our office. We have a student who works with us, and they update that regularly. All students can search and sort external awards by keyword, by deadline, by value, and by ease of application. We encourage you to log into the site and find some additional resources for yourself. Finally, if you read our website, there's so much information there that can help you. And if you still have questions, contact us anytime. We're always around.
That's great. Thank you for walking through that. I know there's going to be some questions, and just as we get to some of those, if you're willing to take them on. Let me also say, in addition to those direct kinds of financial aid resources, there's a real important culture at Osgoode of also trying to make available as many opportunities as we can for our own students. So, for example, a large number of, especially first-year students in the summer between first and second year will work as research assistants for faculty members or for other offices at the law school. Some of those are tied to financial need, some of those are not. And we also have been growing the number of funded summer internships in areas of public interest, in business law, in health law. We have a new one coming in environmental justice and city building. And all of these, again, are great opportunities to both work while you're in law school through a law school program, but again, deal with some of the financial pressures along the way. So we don't view this as somehow disconnected from the rest of student life at Osgoode. We know how fundamental these issues are, and also how important getting financial literacy is to succeeding in whatever career path you take after law school. So the habits that we hope you develop and improve in law school, I think, will hold you in good stead. So let's turn to a few questions around this area. I've got a question from Maria in Toronto on volunteering, which of course is not necessarily going to help pay for law school, but it's going to enrich the experience of law school, and of course contribute, as Kinda said, to the CV that will be so important as your calling card. So the question about volunteering is, what's the sign-up process for clubs and volunteer activities, and when can you start signing up, and how? And given that there are as many clubs and activities, as Kinda mentioned, this is an appropriate question, and we try to, in fact, have a open fair where you'll see and be able to stop in and talk to many, if not all, of these clubs and sign up. But why don't one of you who would like to take on that, or Kinda, since you'd mentioned this, do you want to talk a bit about how that process works?
Sure. So like you said, there is a clubs fair that happens usually within the first 2 weeks of school, where all of the clubs will set up tables and lure you in with delicious treats. And usually you'll put down your email address and they'll begin to email you fairly quickly to invite you to meetings. And then the beauty of them is you get to choose how much you'd like to participate and how involved you'd like to get in with the clubs. But with regards to volunteering, I think Eva can help explain how to sign up for CLASP, which is our legal clinic at Osgoode.
Sure, I can talk about that now. So in during O Week, there's a barbecue, and Laws and CLASP will have just information about our organizations. And the first Friday of O Week, you have the opportunity to come to school very early. We start signing up at 8 o'clock in the morning. And there's usually a long line, so this is for if you want to be an intake volunteer, and that's someone who sits in our clinic, answers phones. It's a 1-hour shift. You have to sign up in order to be considered as an intake volunteer, and there's usually quite a lot of people who want to do that. And then there's also casework volunteering, which is an opportunity for you to work on client files, doing research, writing submissions, assisting to write submissions, and just getting familiar with what CLASP as a legal clinic does for the community, getting familiar with legal terms and how the process works in criminal court or in administrative tribunals. Yeah.
And I've just thought of the connection between this and paying for law school, which is, as you've heard, if you get involved in these activities, you may never have to pay for another lunch again. Barbecues, pizzas, baked goods of various kinds. So we will have a wellness nutrition piece of this session coming soon, because this is actually a, jacked up on pepperoni is no way to go through law school. But there is, again, a wonderful array of opportunities, and again, differently at Osgoode than other programs, we don't consider these extracurricular only. Some are. The baking club is a great example of something that it's about building community and baked goods, but many of these also will satisfy the Osgoode public interest requirement, which is built into our curriculum, and because we think a legal education isn't complete without that kind of experience. So more on that shortly. But back to financial issues, we have a question from Joe and Markham on the 3 categories of need, in quotes, for bursaries, and what goes into that consideration of high need versus low need, which again is part of not just financial literacy, but the way this works in our own bursary process and financial aid process here at Osgoode.
Mm-hmm. So what we do is we assess each application we receive from students individually. We have a very fair process. Everybody, it is all relative to your peers. There is 3 categories, so there's high, medium, and low. Right now those are set at $10,000 for high need, $5,000 for medium need, and $1,200 for a low need bursary. Everything is considered. Assets, debts, resources, and then there's a big section where you can write your personal financial situation. It's very important that that part is completed. We do read every financial case that a student writes, and that's pretty much how we assess whether you're going to be eligible for high, medium, or low need bursaries in a given application period.
Great, and this actually is also an occasion to mention those of you who are worried that racking up debt may start to affect career choice, that we've also been growing what we call our Backend bursaries. These are graduation awards for students who have some significant debt and some public interest ambitions in law and are worried, how am I going to afford to pursue that kind of career track, and one named after a former Osgoode student, Wendy Babcock in particular, has been growing at a fast pace because of all the student fundraising associated with it, including the proceeds from mock trial, which is a highlight of artistic and musical talent. But anyway, all this is not just financial aid, but community building as well, and we take financial aid to be one of our key values around accessibility. So Those, again, if you're interested in particular kinds of programs or have particular worries, there are always going to be more information we can provide. Let's switch gears a little bit, as we have a couple of other questions that are on issues other than the financial. And one, I think, is coming back to this issue of how law school is different than other walks of study. And it's from Daniel, and the topic is on class participation. How important is active participation in class discussions, and does this form a part in the evaluation? And maybe both Kate, you and Trevor, who teach in the first year, might want to say a word about how you view participation.
Yeah, whether or not class participation counts as officially part of your grade is up to the professor. And you'll find out, you'll see the syllabus and you'll see the grade breakdown of what's evaluated on whether that's actually a component of your grade or not. It's not very common, though, for it to be part of the first year courses, the big first year courses. It's much more common that class participation would be officially part of your grade in a seminar type class. And the classes like that you will be taking are perhaps your prospective options that you'll be choosing that would start in January. And there, again, you'll be able to find that out before you choose your class. So if that's something that makes it a more appealing or a less appealing class to you, you'll be able to learn that in advance. But I would say, even if class participation is not an official part of the grade, particularly in classes where your grade really comes down to your performance at the end on your final exam, it's actually a very good way to test yourself, to engage in class and to get a sense of how you're doing by being brave enough to speak out in class and find out whether or not you're getting it as time moves along. So it's encouraged. Trevor?
And I agree with that. And Daniel's question talked about the importance of participation with respect to a grade. I want to pick up on the idea of the importance of participation, period. And Kenda mentioned at the beginning this idea that one of the differences between law school maybe and undergrad is really getting into this idea that there may not be a right answer. There's many answers. There's many perspectives when we're talking about legal and justice-based questions. And that's when deliberation really is exciting and helpful. And we may have our own views on something, but then we hear something from a colleague that really changes how you perceive something. And so as instructors, we really, really encourage participation, not so much for participation's sake, but to develop the ideas, to learn from each other, to learn from ourselves. So it's a critical part of how we learn at law school. And then the question about how is it evaluated, and Kate has mentioned that. It really depends on the course, the instructor. I do it in different ways, depending on whether it's a big group or a small group. But it's always a meaningful part of the course, and somehow it typically is part of how one is evaluated, but often in very fair, objective, and not based on who can talk the loudest or speak the most times. We don't do it that way.
Absolutely. Nadia, we have a question back to you for a moment on particular bursaries. And this question points out that on the website there's some particular name bursaries, the Barber Award, for example. And do you have to apply if you're a student separately to each name bursary you want to be considered for? Or does one application, in effect, get you eligibility for all those that you might be, in fact, able to apply for?
Okay, so what happens is when you complete the application in September, when you arrive at school, what'll happen is the application is very detailed. There's a whole section that asks for specific questions which are related to our specific bursaries that have set criteria. So through that, what we'll do is pull the students that have that criteria and award those bursaries. So you do not have to apply to them separately. It is all part of that one bursary process, and we will go through and find the students who have selected yes to the criteria for those specific bursaries. So one application is all, the main application is all you need to complete.
Great. We have another question coming about this transition to law school from other kinds of programs, and the question deals with writing in particular. And it reads, this may sound silly, but as a mature student, I haven't actually written by hand in a very long time. Our exams handwritten. And furthermore, while I've done a lot of writing since my undergraduate time, it has all been on the computer. When I wrote the written part of the LSAT, one comes face to face with one's penmanship, and it wasn't a pretty sight. Should I be concerned? And in fact, it's good timing, both in relation to being able to give you a clear answer to that, but also what's fast evolving at the law school in our digital culture. But clearly, all exams are written on the computer unless there's a reason why you need or want to write them by hand. We often say that even with a 98% success rate, let's say on exam software, that means 2 times out of every 100 students who write, there will be a problem, and students do need to come prepared to handwrite if there is a problem. But for the overwhelming majority, it is a purely electronic experience, which is not to say you shouldn't work on penmanship, which is a sign of character generally, but not for reasons of surviving legal education. Similarly, note-taking is, almost all, although occasionally an exception. 1 or 2 students will prefer handwriting notes, but again, the overwhelming majority will be typing. Eva, were you a handwriter?
Well, no, but I did take one course where the professor insisted that we handwrite, and so we couldn't bring laptops to take notes.
Because penmanship is a sign of character.
I don't know if that was his reasoning, but he preferred us not to have computers in the classroom.
Yeah, and I think this is a reaction, that one gets from a standpoint of pedagogy. Some are, doubling down on bringing more technology into the classroom, having multimedia on the screen. We use Moodle, which allows for a lot of great learning technology to be imported into the classroom experience and into the preparation. Have live chats after class. Have again very good electronic resources in class and as supplementary to a class. And we're looking at increasing the use of things like the flipped classroom, where lectures can be taped as webinars and the time in the class used to really focus on discussion and problem solving. At the same time, some worry that information passes too much from the hard drive of a faculty member to the hard drive of a student without passing through the mind of either. And so we focus in some classes on this idea of screens down and let's think together about the ideas. Again, most faculty will have slides or PowerPoint or other resources, in summary, so that you don't have to focus your time on taking verbatim notes. And again, as I mentioned, it's a collegial experience, so the reaction of students to these different initiatives and the reaction of faculty to what works in the classroom is really a dynamic rather than static part of the learning experience. But anything else you want to add on the electronic and digital culture, or on classroom participation, because we didn't have a chance for you three to weigh in on that question?
I'll just add really quickly that some people might be having anxieties that they're not too familiar with technology or computers, some mature students or some not mature students. However, we have a great IT help desk, and they're amazing. Because we understand here at Osgoode that most of your exams are written online, they'll sit with you and they'll make sure your exam software is up and running. And as well, you have the opportunity to write those exams on your own laptop, as well as a computer that's provided by Osgoode.
And we should clarify, the software isn't software that allows the computer to write the exam for you. So you're still actually doing the thinking and typing. In fact, if anything, it's software that doesn't allow you to use other parts of your computer. But again, there's great IT supports. The whole building is wireless. Lots of ability to plug in every classroom, and is another time, in fact, to plug not just the wonderful Osgoode Broadcasting Center where we are coming live to you, but a fabulous learning environment in the Ignat Caniff building, which still has a bit of the smell of a new car because it only opened in the fall of 2011, and new spaces and lounges are still coming on stream, but it's a wonderful learning environment, particularly in the way that it's both wired and still feels much more like a home away from home in a living room than it does an institution. So more on that to come. But at this point,
I just wanted to say on the exam question, if a person's anxieties are the opposite of the questioner, if it's that they don't want to write the exam on the computer, they're more comfortable handwriting, that is still an option that you have.
No, absolutely. And in fact, I know some who are quite, technologically savvy and sophisticated, but quite enjoy the writing piece because of what it does in disciplining your thoughts. And I find when people are writing, because they're not used to it, you choose your words ironically more carefully than you do when you're typing, and you're used to being able to delete and cross out things. So it doesn't all come back to penmanship, but again, it really does emphasize how responsive law school can be to particular and different learners. This comes back to Julian's point about no cookie cutter strategy, and we do take every student's interest to heart. But if there is one area, again, where I think law school is different, but this law school in particular is different, it's on the experiential front. And I thought what we would do now, and again, keep the questions coming because we'll break for them again, but at this point move to discuss a bit more about clinical and experiential learning at Osgoode, which covers a really diverse range of programs, courses, clinics, seminars, and the like. And again, our fearless experiential czar, Trevor, will guide you through this part of our discussion.
Terrific, delighted to. So I will talk for a couple of minutes about our experiential program at Osgoode. And the Dean mentioned right at the beginning, it is a real point of pride at Osgoode, and I think rightly so. There are lots of strengths here, and it's certainly one of them. I think it's fair to say, and just putting it bluntly, that Osgoode is a head and shoulders leader in clinical and experiential learning, not just in Canada, but amongst a small group around the world. We really take it seriously and are very proud of the innovations that we've got in this area. I'll talk about what clinical and experiential learning is for a minute. And before I do, though, many of you will have seen that it is now, we take it so seriously that it's part of a graduation requirement. Everyone who comes into Osgoode...
Call that a universal opportunity.
A universal opportunity. There we go. There's an opportunity to do what you have to do. And that is to do some experiential program while you're here, a learning moment here at Osgoode. And that's a good thing, not something to be feared, and it is an opportunity. So what is clinical and experiential learning? Really what it is, if we think about how best we learn as adults, one way to learn is to sit and listen to someone like me at the front of the room crap on about what I think is important. And that is not a good way to learn, because you won't remember it, no one may care, and at the end of the day, it's not an effective learning tool. We've learned that, and so I think better is if we involve both educator and learner in a partnership in terms of a learn by doing sort of model. And we try and do that as much as we can, and that's what we think about when we think about experiential learning. It's all about the student. It's all about thinking how law works in action and how we can best think through that process. There's a number of ways of doing that. In the classroom itself, we've greatly expanded opportunities for engagement, for reflection, for practicing what we do in experiential opportunities within courses. And that may well be a big part of how some of you do experiential learning at Osgoode. Other, though, ways that we often think about clinical and experiential learning at Osgoode. One is our clinical and intensive program, and that involves a wide range of programs that we call clinics and intensive. Clinics are specific places where we have a learning environment, but it's at the same time providing legal services to the public. There are lawyers there, we bring students in, clients come in, and we actually do law in the context of Osgoode Hall Law School, and it's a location where both the learning and the doing happens at the same time. And we have a couple of those kinds of programs. We have CLASP, which Eva mentioned earlier on, we have Parkdale, we have a business clinic, we have a mediation clinic, we have a number of programs in different kinds of areas of law where there are actually live clients, students coming in, engaging with those people, supervised by practicing lawyers or professionals. And it's an exciting way of learning and doing at the same time. So there are a number of those opportunities in different areas of law. We also have what are called intensive programs. They're subtly different, but I think the important thing to think about is there are courses that students can take during which you are then having an opportunity to go and be placed somewhere in a program to sometimes work with clients, sometimes work on policy, but working in the field on interesting legal and policy-based issues. And those include areas such as Aboriginal and land resources, criminal law, intellectual property, anti-discrimination issues, those sorts of issues, a number of areas where we have developed intensive programs where you will do much of your learning by doing. In addition to those clinical and intensive courses, we've also got other kinds of learn by doing programs here at Osgoode. There's a mooting program, and mooting is a term that we use really for advocacy in action, where one stands up and essentially in a simulated setting acts like a lawyer, making arguments on behalf of a client or an organization. In your first year, you will be required to do a moot as part of your legal process course.
Again, you will have the opportunity to do a moot as part of that. Yeah.
I got to get with the program. Everyone has a universal opportunity to moot in their first year.
That's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
I will get that by the end of the night. So everyone can moot in the first year, and many of you will love it so much that there are volunteer moots and competitive moots within the first year context that you can sign up for, and there will be those opportunities. Another experiential moment that is relevant to the first year program as well as throughout, the Dean already mentioned, is OPER, the Osgoode Public Interest Requirement. And that is an innovation that Osgoode led the way on in Canada, and again is one of a handful of schools in North America where we have a universal opportunity to provide public interest services as part of your legal education experience. And that, again, is something that we take seriously. If law really is in the public interest and public service, we think we should be doing it, and everyone has to do it. And so that's one of these learning moments. There are also other collaborations and research innovations that are part of this. And one of them that we want to introduce to you by way of a video is one that's connected up with CAMH, and the Dean is involved in an experiential, a collaborative research reading course that involves a partnership with CAMH. And what we'll do now is we'll run a short video that will introduce you to that example of an experiential program.
So I think what law school does really well is to teach you to think like a lawyer, and that's what everybody says it does. And I think in some ways it's really helpful to not think like a lawyer. So courses like the CAMH Collaborative Research course really give you an opportunity to go out and talk to people who aren't lawyers. And I think what thinking like a lawyer really helps you do is see the issues, but you don't necessarily get a very good grasp on what the problems are as they affect people on the ground.
It's not an ordinary kind of course, and it's both directed research, but it's collaborative. It involves coming down to CAMH in addition to work up at Osgoode and work outside a library and outside a database. It's talking to experts in the field, gaining an understanding of the problem, and then trying to be constructive, but also rigorous in telling CAMH not what CAMH might want to hear, but what CAMH needs to hear, and where the research takes the students is always going to be a voyage of discovery.
It's so different from anything else I've taken at Osgoode. It's been great to be able to collaborate with the people at CAMH and with other people in the class.
You learn a lot. You get to have experiences that you would just not have in class.
Mental health law is developed out of CAMH, and it's really unique to have litigation practice inside a hospital setting, and that's a great opportunity to expose young law students, young lawyers to that work. So over time, we've really been developing our student program, and Osgoode was a great way to continue.
one thing in meeting sort of the lawyers and doctors here is, they often have sort of thoughts or ideas about these subjects, and so obviously can sort of provide good guidance in that way. But they're also, I think in many cases we're sort of going deeper into subjects than they maybe have time or inclination to do.
This type of course that has a direct impact stemming from the students' research, I think, is a very unique opportunity and a very powerful one for a young lawyer, but also for CAMH as a potential client for these young students.
The big question always is, will students want to do this? And of course, you put it out there at a place like Osgoode. There's great choices. There's Parkdale. There's class, mediation intensive programs, great courses, seminars in every conceivable field. So what was really amazing is to see some of our absolute best and brightest students show up and want to take on something for which there's no obvious precedent.
So I would say to other students considering this kind of opportunity, definitely take it. It's, I think, in my opinion, what law school and learning the law is all about.
So in terms of your first year and really starting in the first week and going forward in terms of the clinical intensive programs, like what you've just seen and like some of the examples I gave you, there are some specific things in the first year. There is the opportunity to get into your OPER hours and your OPER experience right off the bat, and many of you will bring with you ideas of public interest, volunteer placements, things you can do, and we have our OPER office that can help you with that. And we really do encourage you not only to start thinking about that, but to get into it in your first year. I mentioned the mooting program. We also heard about the laws program, the law in action within schools. Excellent program that is open and that might interest a number of you. And then there are also volunteer opportunities within those clinical programs that I mentioned. For example, the Osgoode Business Clinic has an opportunity for some volunteer placements for students. And another clinic that is very popular with the students in-house is CLASP. And rather than me talking about it, what I might do is pass this back to Eva to end this part of the session with a discussion from you on that volunteer opportunity in CLASP and around that issue.
So in your first year, right off the bat, you have the opportunity to sign up as one of two primary volunteer positions, which is first there's the intake volunteers who do 1-hour shifts once a week. So it's actually really low time commitment, but really gets you involved in the clinic in terms of speaking to clients, learning the law as you go along. You're supervised by someone who is already familiar with the process. And so you're not left alone trying to figure out what you're supposed to say to people who call, but you're able to learn and contribute to the Jane and Finch community, because a lot of our clients come from that community in the first place. The second position is a caseworker who supports the person who has a client file, and you can do legal research, other kinds of research, providing assistance with submissions, written submissions, possibly attending hearings or court dates. And it's just a really great way to put what you've learned in class into practical use and be able to help people, advocate for them when they need help. So there's also a few other positions that are more community-oriented. And those are not necessarily for OPER hours, but really allow you to see the way the clinic and Osgoode can reach out to the people in the community, not just in Toronto, but specifically in the Jane and Finch community, which is so close by.
I think it's picks up on a theme, not just the problem-solving type of curriculum we talked about before, but also being outwardly focused, and it's an irony, because as we've moved in this direction, we literally got windows in the building, which for many years had a charming bunker-like feel, and now, of course, we've got floor-to-ceiling windows and atriums, and we'll hear more about that. But that idea of being focused on community can take students and does take Osgoode students, halfway across the world in our International Legal Partnerships program and fellowships. But I think it is a real important goal that many students share, to leave this community where the law school is situated better than we found it. And that is an opportunity that underscores much of what CLASP, laws, and other programs do. But the key, coming back to something Professor Farrow said, is to find your fit. There are clinical and experiential programs in every conceivable area of law that you're going to be interested in. And so it's not about having to change your stripes in order to have the experiential component, but about seeing law in action in the very fields that you're most interested in, and then reflecting on it. So it's not in any of these settings just the doing piece that distinguishes experiential learning at Osgoode, but the marriage of having that chance to be a part of solving problems in real time, and then reflecting on how that shapes courses, ideas, and the academic material. So thank you very much, Eva and Trevor, for that. And I think what we'll do is move back to some questions, and we've got a few interesting ones lined up. So from Adam in Hamilton, there's a question on legal specialization, and Adam writes that he's excited by the different avenues that can be pursued in practice, but the choices are, of course, daunting. And aside from taking, the courses that are set out in first year, what kinds of programs, workshops, can individuals take advantage of? What resources are out there to understand practicing in a particular area of law in a day-to-day sense? And this is a nice opportunity to talk a bit about the Career Development Office, which is another part of student services. And Julian mentioned some of the committed, knowledgeable staff at Osgoode, but in this area, it's particularly an important mix. In other words, between understanding those different career paths, what practice will be like, and then the academic advising, that if you're interested in intellectual property, what are the different foundation and upper year classes, or getting involved with IP Osgoode, our in-house Center for Intellectual Property that has its own blog, that has its own conferences. And this is an area that is specific around the interests that are most going to animate our students. But once you decide to get involved, there are a lot of different and interesting ways to get a window into what practice looks like, either from academic advising, I want to be this kind of lawyer, what kind of program should I build? And we have a number of resources on stitching together your own program, because after first year, you're essentially making all those choices independently with, again, lots of supports, but it's meant to be tailored to your interests. Some go on exchanges, some stay close to home, some take a concentration in a couple of fields or one field. Many others want to have a potpourri. All of that, again, can expose you to adjunct professors as well as full-time. So getting a window into practice through their vantage point is important. And again, using the resources to say, how do I connect this academic interest to that career interest is really key. But anything you want to add from your experiences with connecting the dots between academic study and the day-to-day realities of practice?
One thing that I would add is that the student clubs here at Osgoode, because they're so focused in terms of some academic areas and some practice areas of law, for example, the business law community here at Osgoode, through their association, organizes firm tours. And so you'll be able to go and visit with a representative from various firms in Toronto and the surrounding area, and have an opportunity to get that window into what practicing in that area of law can be like.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. Anything else either of you wanted to add?
No, I think.
Great. So let's turn to another question, this one from Stuart in Toronto on experiential programs. Do experiential programs begin in second year, and are there admission requirements to being accepted to such programs? Which is an excellent question, because as Trevor Farrow will now explain, some in fact do have a screening or selection criteria. Some you simply apply for in the normal course of choosing classes and first come, first serve. But why don't you say a word about how this works? And of course, some are limited space, so there is always competition, even though we have a wealth of different options to ensure everyone meets that universal opportunity to build experience in?
Sure. Thanks, Stuart, for your question. And the answer is yes, most of these programs begin in your second year. As mentioned, there are some opportunities in the first year that I did go over, and you can explore those in more detail. But the big time where most of the larger experiential programs come up is in your second and third year, and there is an application process, and it starts with an information fair in the fall. There's lots of information, there's lots of opportunity to talk to colleagues, to explore different ideas and what have you. And that culminates in essentially what the clinical education day in January, where all the programs are put on offer, and then there's an application process that happens in the early winter at that point. Most of them have an application and selection process. Some of them have interviews. It depends on numbers and how it's done, but it is a selection process. And then students will be notified of what program they've been admitted to in the late winter, lots of time to sort out calendars for the following year. So when this will happen is you will start to get into this in your first year, the information fair, and then you will apply for programs to do either in your second year, or you can wait and do them in your third year. And there's no rhyme nor reason to doing this. There's different people that prefer to do it second year, some prefer to do it the third year. As the dean said, there's different programs for all folks, so we do our best to accommodate everyone, but there is a selection process.
And again, some aficionados may want to do a whole semester at a clinic. Some will simply do this as one of 4, or so courses in a term. So it really has a range of ways to fit. So Heather in Vancouver has a question for the students that involves them going completely rogue off script, not to the party line that we've carefully tailored for them, but to the reality check. The question is, would the students share their insights on their own personal experience of first year? How did it meet or differ from your own expectations or fears? And we're just among friends and warm supporters, so feel free to share any candid confession and or reflection.
All right, candid, I was scared coming into my first year. I was really scared. I was scared I wasn't going to fit in. Kind of had that feeling of entering high school all over again, where you don't really know anybody.
Not in a good way either.
No, not in a good way. No. But I really enjoyed my first year experience, and maybe I'll talk academically and these guys can talk a little bit otherwise. It differed from my perception of the law school because you see some movies or depictions of law school where professors are spitting out questions at you, and if you don't know the answer, you're ashamed. And I didn't find that experience at all. I found the collaborative learning in many of my classes was really enjoyable. I was fortunate enough to have Dean Sossin as one of my professors this year, and I found the range of public speakers that were invited into the classroom, and the range of types of learning styles and teaching styles that were utilized really welcoming, in contrast to those movie depictions of law school. So that's the one thing I would say differed from my perception of what it would be like.
And do you want to share something about the test for issue estoppel at this point? It's just a little, yeah. What do you think?
So similar to Julian, I was shocked about my first year at law school because I entered Osgoode thinking that students were going to be ripping pages out of my notebook or wirelessly deleting files off my computer.
That's
as
terrible.
It may be. It's just, there's a stereotypical, idea of a law student competitive
and
type A students. And Julian and I happened to be in the same section, and I was shocked as to how great of a family we built in our section, which sounds sappy, but it makes a difference when you're undergoing a lot of stressful times with exams. And relying on those friendships and those friends to be there for you when you are in need. But frankly, first year is amazing if you take advantage of all the opportunities. We guarantee a great time. It's work really, really hard and have some fun at the same time too. So.
Okay. And Eva, what was your experience like? Thinking way back now.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember first year now. It's been, I think last year kind of pushed everything out of my mind except for clasp. I think first year, I think the one thing I kind of regret was that I didn't take full advantage of student services. And I really recommend that, as soon as possible, if you need it, book an appointment and try to talk to someone if you have any questions. I think I did get involved in a few clubs, but I wasn't going whole hog. I know some people try to join every single possible committee. I wasn't quite like that, but if you want to, I think you get as much of an experience out of law school as you put into it. Mm-hmm. So if you get involved, or even if it's just beefing up your resume, I'm going to be practical and say sometimes that's what it is. But do what you like. Don't just join clubs because it'll look good on your resume, because clearly people will figure out that you were just doing it for that reason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's, we'll squeeze in one more question before we talk a bit more about student life, and that clearly was is a good segue. And this question is as well, because we appreciate that as much as students are focused on academic activities, a lot of things happen in their life, and a lot of people bring experiences to the law school that will require sometimes extra accommodations. And the question is inviting us to speak a bit about the process for students who might have a learning disability to be granted, for example, extra time on exams. But the question could apply to anxiety or depression or mental health issues that many students live with and thrive with at Osgoode. And always can't reiterate enough what an inclusive community we try to build, and that means taking seriously all the different things that either happen in life or that students bring with them as part of their package to law school. So we have not only excellent internal resources for students who identify that they have an issue, ranging from, as Associate Dean Sutherland mentioned, one-on-one meetings for academic advising or to seek accommodations through petitions, and with our student services and the academic side working hand in hand. But in addition, for some students, the accommodation does need to happen either throughout the term or in the exams. And a Counseling and Disability Services Office at York University provides both a set of standards that we adopt and excellent supports. And we have both a relationship with them and, as was mentioned earlier, I think an academic success and wellness officer, Melanie Banca-Goella, who also can help bridge between what a student identifies as an issue and what the resources might be to help. The key, though, in that answer is students who identify, and a real concern is encouraging students to come on a confidential basis, first to student services or through Melanie Banca-Goella's office or through CDS directly, but that they identify that there are issues that are going to be crucial to their success. And then there's, again, a range and wealth of supports, and all of this, again, respecting confidentiality where that's appropriate, and yet, also being very much about including and valuing every individual student for everything they bring. So that's a fine line sometimes to walk, and we found a new way to walk it this last year with our first Mental Health Awareness Week, for example, where we both wanted to expose all students to the issues in the legal system, in the university, in the law school that engage mental health issues, but also doing it in a way that respects and values privacy. So I know the question was about learning disabilities, but I think it's a broad issue that anyone who's bringing something with them that they think could get in the way of their succeeding in the academic program should know that there are partners and supports at Osgoode to make sure everyone lives up to every ounce of their potential. So with that, let's talk a bit more about student life, because as much as we said before, there's a seamlessness to some of these programs, volunteering, experiential learning, the social side that also can build resumes. You get the sense that the boundaries are quite blurry ones, and we recognize for students it's a seamless day. They may start in a class, but then it's the quality of the food in the bistro, to the lighting in the library, to being able to get, wireless when you need it, to, having supports in student services, and then friends, to hang out with in residence or with downtime, living all across the city, staying connected, keeping some of your own family and friends and time for all aspects of life that matter is no easy undertaking. And I think if there's anything that's changed since I was an Osgoode student a few years ago, it is exactly this kind of consuming time management issue. Came in a simpler time. There simply weren't as many universal opportunities, wasn't as much going on, the intensity wasn't the same. And again, I don't think the intensity is off-putting. It's what a lot of people want from law school. How can I squeeze as much out of this experience for the time I'm here? We know it's a huge investment of time, of resources, and we want to provide everything that a student would most want. And we know that that goes beyond what happens in the classroom. So for student life, ranging from a bit of the building to the city, campus, residence, let's start maybe with Eva and talking about Osgoode Chambers, and then we can move on to each of our students and their reflections.
All right, sure. So I lived in Osgoode Chambers in first year and second year, and I really enjoyed it because, I'll admit, the convenience factor, because it is possible to roll out of bed 15 minutes before class. And I think that's one of the biggest draws living on campus. In these different styles of apartments, there's bachelors, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms. And I found that it was really good to see my neighbors are my fellow students. If you have a question, you can just knock on the person's door next to you. There are a lot of events that happen on campus that it might be difficult to get back and forth if you're living further away. So having that central location, being able to participate in events, getting to your 8:30 classes on time, I think that's a huge draw.
Not to mention the rolling hills of Downsview.
Yes. I mean, we do have a great express bus to the subway station, but it's being on campus frees your time for more activities.
Now, Eva, we should add just on that point, the class that you will be a part of also will be a very special transition, long awaited in the York University and Osgoode Community, from only being able to take an express bus to the subway, and in fact having a subway stop at York University, which will open during your time at Osgoode. And that, again, from the standpoint of connecting with the city, the built environment, and the place of this university in the city will be a radical transformation. And again, I think even though we have students living all over the GTA, the GTHA, for those Hamilton aficionados, it still is a challenge in terms of the commute for many students. And we recognize that, we try to schedule and accommodate with classes in the evening, classes during the day, once you're in the upper years, so that you can mix and match. But living on campus does take that whole factor off the table.
Yes, especially I had a prospective option in my winter term of first year that was in the evening. And so rather than try to take public transit back home, it was safer just to walk the 2 minutes to my to my residence. And there's the Owl's Nest, which you will hear more about, I'm sure, which is located in Passy Gardens, which is the townhouse complex for Osgoode Chambers. And it's just open to people who live there, and you can go hang out. There's big screen TV, people are always there. And yeah, it's just it's a good way to build community.
Right. And maybe just a last point on that side of life. We know there's also from time to time concerns about security, or concerns about living on campus, and again, we take those very much to heart. We've got a lot of resources, a lot of Osgoode specific ones in addition to the university ones, but this is something, again, we recognize as an important quality of life issue and community issue, in that because we are open during the day into the evenings, there's always events and things going on. We're happy happy that our track record has been a very positive one, but remain really proactive on this front, and that includes everything from good lighting and having programs where you can have someone walk with you if you're going out to your car, for example, if you commute, all the way to students just being well educated on what to do in various situations, and we take again all of that as part of the quality of student experience at Osgoode. So do you want to come back, Kinda, to some of the clubs and student government and the areas that you broached? Is obviously a big part of student life at Osgoode as well.
Definitely. I would say that part of my first year experience was being exposed to how active Osgoode students are within the Osgoode community and outside. And so, as I mentioned earlier, there are a number of clubs to participate in, but there are also leadership opportunities to take advantage of with our student government. So we have two different bodies. We have Student Caucus, which is the Osgoode student government that primarily deals with things that will come to mind day to day when you're in class, when you think of accessibility to lecture recordings or lighting in the library, for example, or cafeteria options. And then we have another body called the Legal and Literary Society, more commonly known as Legal and Lit, which is not a book club, surprisingly, but it is our student life governing body, and they take care of things like social events, getting Osgoode students involved and interacting, and they help oversee student life at Osgoode. So there are positions for 1L students that you will hear about in September if you would like to participate. In addition, there are a number of major extracurricular activities. Mooting was referred to our experiential program, so volunteering with CLASP or Pro Bono Students Canada. Then we have our creative side of things at Osgoode, like Mock Trial, which is our annual production. It is hilarious and an impressive display of talent at Osgoode. We also have academic journals to participate in and newspapers like Obiter Dicta and thecourt.ca, as well as the yearbook, which I participate in. So this is my, shameless plug for the yearbook. And then torts, of course. I think Dean Sossin promised I would give you the full name, which is the Osgoode Recreational Treating Society.
Torts.
Torts.
No, and we haven't talked a lot about Osgoode's rich history, because you've already chosen Osgoode, so there's only so much selling we need to do. But it is actually a wonderful part of daily life. And when you mention the Legal and Literary Society, it actually predates the date we count as the founding of the law school in 1889. And during your time here, you'll help us celebrate the 125th anniversary of the school. But we have the composites, the pictures that you get on graduation lining our walls. Those of you who've been here for Welcome Day have seen this for every year since then. But there's a corollary picture of all the legal and lit executives over all those years. And again, some amazing stories, some amazing luminaries have all been leaders on the student government side. And this also includes a range of those mixes of, like you mentioned, the court.ca or the IPALOG or IFLS's blog. And this is a chance to both do writing on law and participation, activism, have fun all at once. So again, we don't have a lot of sharp boundaries, but the quality of academic life and student life definitely merge. Julian, anything else on student life?
Just a quick thing to add. York, the broader York, I can speak to this because I went here as an undergrad student, is known as a big commuter school. And I found that I've never found such a tight-knit community as I have at Osgoode. We do have a large entering class of approximately 290 students. However, when you come here in September, you'll be divided into 4 sections or cohorts. And I think that time that where you have every single class with all the same people. Not only do you have all your classes with the same people, but you also have all your breaks with the same people. And so, like it or not, you're kind of stuck with them, and that really contributed.
In a good way.
Yeah, universal opportunity to be with with the same people. And you know what? Now that I don't have to be with these people all the time, I see my classmates regularly throughout the summer, and we're all doing different things. And I think that's a great thing that we do here at Oz.
Excellent. And we've got a couple of questions on student life. Why don't we go to them, and then we can bring in any others who want to get in on this part of the discussion. One question, again, from Dean in Hamilton, deals with the daily routine and the commute that we were just speaking of. If I'm commuting an hour each way daily, what's one to do about simple things like having a locker? Is there athletic or fitness facilities available for students at the building or nearby? Lounge or place, to just have some downtime, and what to do when you've got time to kill or needs to recharge. And I think you guys are going to be the best placed to speak to some of this, but certainly we do cater to both the students like Eva, who are rolling out of bed 2 minutes before class right across the street, and students coming from even farther away than Hamilton. But do you want to speak about some of the spaces for downtime and facilities?
Sure. I have had a similar schedule in my first year. And so, to be honest, I treated my first year of law school like a job. So I would try to get here as early as I could to beat the rush, so 8 a.m., and then leave, depending on when my classes ended, leave so that I didn't hit the rush hour. I spent mornings in the library to catch up on readings, and then when I needed my mindless kind of chatty Cathy time with my Section D buddies, we would generally take over the junior common room called the JCR, and we would put a bunch of tables together and actually have our lunches together and just have, I guess, Section D family time is what we called it. So there are a number of nooks in Osgoode as well outside of the JCR and our cafe on the second floor that provide quiet areas for reading or just bathing in the sunlight, because now we have windows. And the couches are very comfy.
I'll answer your first two questions off the top. The first about lockers. There are lockers available downstairs in our basement. And this year they were available for, I think, $15 for the entire year to rent. So I used it. I'm a commuter, albeit not from very far, but I did use the locker services. As well, there is a gym on campus, but not in the Osgoode building, so it's nearby. It's about a 5-minute walk. And again, the membership fee for that gym, I think, is about $10. So well worth it.
Although a group of students who did, it's winter, I wanted to stay in-house and still have some exercise generated, what can be best described as a recess club. And so they just took over a big raw space we have, which we configure for moots and events, called the ADR Center, and instead brought in mats and balls, and had a great experience burning off some steam. And there's lots of opportunities for nice walks, both through buildings when it's cold, through the pond, and some areas that still have some of the original wooded paths from when all of this part of the city was part of a forest. So you really can get that wide range. Plus, of course, lots of urban amenities close by, in walking distance, either on campus or on the fringes of the campus. So I think you really can get a lot of those experiences if you've got, if you're organized and if you talk to people about what the best fit would be. So staying with this theme of social life, do students stay on campus to socialize or study after class, or do most just come to campus to be in class? And we've talked about that a little bit, but I think there is also an interesting subculture of commuters from particular areas. I know lots of people have gone online to get matched in effectively people who they need a lift from a particular area of the city, or they carpool and switch off driving. A lot of people do meet and come up together on the subway bus combination. And I'd say the students who just come up to be in class and then leave really do constitute the exception now. That would have been probably the rule again when I came to Osgoode, and there was far less going on around class unless you lived in residence. And I'd say now a few students still do it, and we're recognizing as well some students have part-time jobs, some students are single parents. There's lots of other things going on in life, but I think if you are committed, you can still find ways to be very involved, even if the time constraints are real. So I'd say it's very few who just come up for class anymore. But you're my reality check. Is that your experience as well?
Well, I know that there are students who just manage to camp out in the school for long hours, and the library is open pretty late into the night. And so people do stay on campus and study during the school year. I think I even see people come in on weekends, even when they don't live on campus. They will come into school so that they can study at the library or study with a group. So people definitely do that. And there are clubs and activities. Sometimes they have evening events. So definitely people are here. If you have a study group, maybe it's easier to meet in the evenings just so that you have the dinner break and then you go back to studying.
But we should clarify, even though you have great space and free food, you cannot actually live in the building. We will eventually notice. Weren't you in that same position on that same chair last night? So it is though meant to cater to people who are spending the day, and that was a hardship when we were under construction, and I heard this from a lot of students, not having that shared space together. And so now in this renovated building, it's something we don't take for granted, we do take advantage of. Let's move to a question again that combines some of student life, some of the financial issues that Nadia talked about, and also a clear reason why people are in law school in many cases as well, and that's employment opportunities. And the question for the students is about summer jobs and what kinds of employment have you been able to secure during the summer months? Is that helpful in financing law school, and maybe, if not just your own share experiences of others who you've been with? And this is clearly a different experience after first year than after second year. And as you'll find out more from the Career Development Office, there's a specific program for students looking for paid work in after second year. There's a small number of those kinds of positions with different firms and government organizations for first year students, but by and large after first year it's the internships, the research assistantships, that kind of work. But what was your experience like? Maybe Eva, we'll start with you this time.
Well, mine was pretty straightforward because I had applied to CLASP and was accepted. And so with CLASP, you have a first year summer position that begins in May, goes all the way till August, and then in September, it's more of the experiential learning as a student as opposed to as an employee. But I do know friends who've, you find volunteer positions, or you can look on the website, OLE, or it's called Legalese, which posts job opportunities in the Toronto area or outside of Toronto that you can apply for.
And just by the numbers, after second year in that what's called the on-campus interviews, or the OCI process that leads to those summer jobs, again at lots of private and public employers. Osgoode had has had a track record that's really successful. But just to give you a rough sense of the numbers, this would be about 90 or so students out of not everyone in that year applies, but it's a very good proportion of students who apply who get that opportunity. And again, for those who don't, a range of other positions that are going to give lots of professional experience. Some bypass it altogether and want work in settings that are institutional or don't participate in that match. But the key is the career office really is a enormous resource, no matter what your career interests are, even if they veer off law altogether. And many of our graduates have gone on to great success in business, in the arts, in politics, in social justice fields that don't involve practice. Anything else on the job front? Kinda, you're working downtown this summer.
I am. So I think it's similar to Eva, actually. My work opportunity arose because I participated with the program I work with throughout the school year. So I worked with laws as an academic tutor from September until the end of April. And a position came up for a summer job program coordinator, and because the coordinators of the program knew me, they thought I would be a good fit, so I applied and I interviewed and I secured a position. But I would like to say that I did participate in the formal 1L hiring process in the winter that some students participated, but I was not able to secure a job, so there are no hard feelings. It's not something that should get your, morale down. And I was able to secure a job in through another avenue, and I'm able to work this summer in a program that I actually enjoy a lot.
That's great. Anything else, Julian, from you?
One thing I would just add is I'd like to debunk the idea that you need to have a law-related job in your first summer. A lot of my colleagues are traveling, and a lot of my colleagues are making money, and that's kind of important too. I think it's important to have something that adds to you as a person, adds to you and your character, and so that's just one thing I would add. No,
it's a great point, and of course we also have summer study programs abroad in some really exciting places, so it is a range of opportunities for a range of tastes and needs. We are, as usual, going to run out of time before we run out of important issues to discuss, so I'd encourage, if there are any final questions that you haven't had a chance to offer us to do so. And while we're waiting for you, let's address one question that's come in dealing with the kinds of services offered by our library and workshops in particular around academic success and supports. Our library is one of the jewels of the crown, as they say at Osgoode, and interestingly, for many years was known for its size, largest law library in the Commonwealth. But as we're moving from books to bytes, it's really the quality of our excellent librarians and the services that we are becoming more known for, and that includes some important resources for first-year students. Trevor, I don't know if you wanted to say anything about the library and its role in legal process and more generally.
Sure. There'll be a number of opportunities to get familiar not just with the library but also how to use it. And you'll have an introduction to it, as the Dean mentioned, Lauren. As part of the legal process course, you will get a detailed introduction to how to use legal sources, how to use our library, and how to use them in your writing and your research. And then the library is also extremely accommodating of putting on seminars, assisting on a one-off basis or in organized groups. For example, if you're going to be a research assistant for the summer, at the front end of the summer, they host a couple of different sessions where people are refamiliarized with the research process and how it works. So I think you'll find that there's lots of opportunities, both individualized and also as part of courses.
Excellent. So I think the last couple of things I wanted to share really on behalf of the whole panel involve something that was mentioned earlier around what to do or what to think about over the summer. And this goes not to the top 10 novel list, but if you follow Kate's Twitter feed, you will no doubt get the best reading of your life. But and it doesn't go to kind of anything even that we're mailing out to you in terms of a book, but it really speaks more to just come here as clear as you can be on why you're choosing law, why you're choosing to spend 3 years of your life doing this. And I think that process can be, hiking up a mountain for some, working, a last job to have resources to pay the bills for some. But it's an opportunity before this intensity to really get sure of yourself, because there will be winds blowing at you from lots of directions. Your heads can get turned, hair can go askew, but if your feet are firmly planted where you need them to be, all the rest, I think, is just part of that learning curve. And so as you reflect on that, we're going to have one last question that we'll squeeze in before bidding you a good evening, and that's around one opportunity we talked a little bit about in terms of research assistants. This is from Harjit in Brampton. How open are professors to first-year students volunteering or working as research assistants, and do you suggest approaching professors conducting research in areas of interest early in the year? And this kind of comes in two parts. One is that summer program I mentioned, especially after first year, where there will actually be a lot of postings, and once the postings go up, people usually are given instructions when the window is to apply. Some, of course, who share a real passion with a professor in a subject area may have already made themselves known. But the other piece of this is research assistants during the year or on particular projects or for conferences. And again, a number of these opportunities come up. My own sense is while you don't need to approach a faculty member directly to express your interest, because things are posted and there will be an application process, it's never a bad idea to touch base if you want to be a criminal defense lawyer, for example, with the great criminal law faculty we have. And by doing that, when opportunities come up, you are on the radar screen, and that's never a bad thing. But again, it's not as if only those who do that will get the opportunities. We pride ourselves on a really fair process, on equity in all these opportunities. Anything that you want to add on being an RA or how you choose your RAs?
Yeah, in terms of a first-year student getting an RA position during their first year, early on, whether or not you would have a chance at those jobs, I think really depends on what kind of research the professor is doing. If the professor is doing really intensive doctrinal research and you're not yet really familiar with legal research and reading cases and so on, you might not have as good a chance at doing that as an upper year student would. But lots of professors are doing interdisciplinary research. You're all coming in with amazing backgrounds. Sometimes the reason that we'll want to work with you is because of the skills that you already bring with you. For example, for me with my law and literature research, if you've got a background in studying literature, even if you don't know very much about the law yet, I might really want to have you come and work for me as a research assistant. So certainly there will be opportunities like that for first-year students, even right at the beginning of your time as a student.
Trevor, anything else?
No, I agree. And the only other thing I'd mention is there are a number of institutes and organizations associated with Osgoode and with York. I'm involved in a couple of them, and we hire students through those organizations as well. Things like the Canadian Forum on Civil Justice, the York Centre for Public Policy and Law, and the like. And we have hired first-year students, we've hired upper-year students, and it's just part of that engaged environment. So do check it out if you're interested, and I agree with what the Dean said, and it's never a bad idea to let people know you're interested in.
Okay, well, we are coming to the end. Kate, do you want to give a teaser on what's coming in your top 10 list when they go to your blog?
Yeah, I was just going to say I will write a list for the blog because I haven't thought up a list of 10, but I will say that there's an awful lot of good, if you're interested in reading fiction, there are a lot of good novels and a lot of good short stories. There are also a lot of great films and so on that you might want to watch that are law related to sort of whet your appetite. But the most recent novel that I read that had a legal component to it that was an excellent read was Zadie Smith's N.W., which has one character that becomes a lawyer, so I would certainly recommend that one.
Yeah, and in fact, this is to Sarah's question in Vancouver around Kate's top 10. Not only is it a good read for those who already know something of her work, but it led to one of our centers, IFLS, the Feminist Legal Studies Center, having a book club that organized a discussion of that particular novel, which again is provocative and fun and challenging all at once. And so to people who don't normally take enough time of their day in the academic year to read, finding ways to connect with faculty and graduate students and see how legal and important ideas about justice get expressed in those media is really important. And I'd add, the building itself has also become a place where we've brought art exhibits. We had one this past year on life in the Lodz ghetto in the 1940s as a way into discussing the relationship between law and genocide, for example. And this fall, we're bringing a photo exhibit involving the Roma experience in Canada, and it will be a vehicle for exploring refugee rights, the immigration system, and this is in addition to Cindy Blazevich, our wonderful artist in residence, photographer, who's joining Osgoode in the second semester. So those who love art, who love law, and who have their interest piqued around how they can combine the two, have lots of fun in store. But with that, let me, on behalf of the panel, not only wish you a relaxing and idea-filled summer, but also let me share again the pride that we all feel in the Osgoode community, how much we're looking forward to welcoming you, and also to your taking ownership over your law school experience. And that's been a theme, I think, throughout everything from the curriculum to financial literacy to student life. This will literally be what you make of it. And I hope we've given you some of the building blocks to think about tonight. And for those who are more concretely focused on how do I get access to that Kate Sutherland blog on law and literature, the plug is?
Now's the part where I get embarrassed about how long it's been since I've updated it, but that list will go up tomorrow. It's the law, arts, culture. So law, arts, culture.
Law/arts/culture will be not the acronym, but the actual words. Please do take a look. It's one of a number of great blogs that have been written and compiled by our faculty, but it's one again that we hope you'll start thinking about in your own journey and how to combine the things you're passionate about with the ideas that Osgoode will expose you to. And on that note, and with thanks to our fearless producer, Assistant Dean Maya Bulwa, all of the technical supports and people who've been making all of this come to life for you from the Osgoode Broadcasting Center. Have a wonderful rest of the night and summer, and see you in September or late August.